Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastyacharishadharine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastyacharishadharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravata Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravata Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravata Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravata Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kundinya Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kundinya Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kundinya Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradhari, Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradhari, Yasodanandana Madhujana Ranjana, Yasodanandana Madhujana Ranjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Hari Rama Sankirtan ki jai. Shilpa ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa. Parirajikacharya Stata Satashri Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakota Vaishnavinda ki. Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur ki. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar. Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta ki. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath. Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki. Shri Mayapur Dham ki. Jagannath Puri Dham ki, Ganga Maya ki, Jamuna Maya ki, Tulasi Devaki, Bhakti Devaki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Lord Chaitanya's Harinam Sankirtan ki, Brihat Madanga ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shishi Gaur Nitai ki, Gaur Premanandi, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to Sri Guru and Grand Gaur, glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastichade Shatani. Excuse me. Hare Krishna, good morning and good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is to all you wonderful Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Anchikalpa Trupyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, morning we'll read a little bit from Nectar of Instruction. And I haven't specifically prepared anything specific, or maybe we'll show something related to this morning's subject matter. But today we're moving on to verse number 4 of the Nectar of Instruction. If you have it there, Janananda browser. I only decided this morning, it was one of those days yesterday. And this is text number 4 of the Nectar of Instruction. Here it is. It's a beautiful verse. I can just imagine a world where everybody has Krishna as the center of their lives. There's no envy. There's no, as we know it in this material world, fear, anxiety, all the other various experiences we have interacting in this material world, experiences which we may not be very enthusiastic about. We may be enthusiastic about, but they're experiences which keep us bound up in this material world. As in the spiritual world, every living entity is existing harmoniously with the will of the Lord. The devotional service is the process to try to transform our will from seeing ourselves in the center to seeing Krishna in the center. So today's verse is a very wonderful verse in this regard. So please repeat after me. Tadati Pativinati Guyam Akyati Prikshati Bhumte Bojayate Chaiva Sadvidam Priti Lakshanam. And line by line. Line by line, please. We'll go back to the verse too. Dadati Pratigrinati Guyamakyati Prichati Bhumte Bojayate Chaiva Sadvidam Priti Lakshanam. And we go word for word. Synonyms. Dadati gives charity. I'll just read it through. You can read it yourselves. We're not going to repeat this one. Pratigrinati accepts in return. Guyam, confidential topics. This word comes up in the Bhagavad Gita on a few occasions. Guyatamam is in the Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna says, this is now I'm going to teach you confidential knowledge. And then he says more confidential. And finally he says most confidential. Three, in the Bhagavad Gita, 3 instructions of the Lord are given. Confidential knowledge, more confidential knowledge, most confidential knowledge. So here the word confidential topics is discussed here. Akyati explains, Prichati inquires, Bhukte eats, Bojayate feeds, Cha also, Ava certainly, Satvidam 6 kinds, Priti pure love, all love, Lakshanam symptoms. And the translation of this verse, offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasadam, and offering prasadam are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. And we'll read a bit of the purport now. In this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami explains how to perform devotional activities in the association of other devotees. This association of devotees is foundational in any spiritual growth, Krishna conscious growth of all the, at any stage of our life, the association of devotees is required, is necessary. And it's relished. The devotional practices are generally relished. Dhamma sangam, mamavirya sangvido, bhavanti vidkarma sanakata, in the association of devotees. This devotional service is relished. One feels a relish in the ear, through hearing, and in the heart, in the association of devotees. So there are 6 kinds of activities. It says perform devotional activities in the association of devotees. Pretty simple mentioned here. 6 kinds of activities. Giving charity to the devotees, accepting from the devotees whatever they may offer in return. Opening one's mind to the devotees. 4, inquiring from them about confidential service of the Lord. 5, honoring prasadam or spiritual food given by the devotees. And 6, feeding the devotees with prasadam. An experienced devotee explains, and an inexperienced devotee learns from him. This is Guru Makyati Prichati. When a devotee distributes prasadam, remnants of food offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to maintain our spirited devotional service, we must accept this prasadam as the Lord's grace received through the pure devotees. We should also invite pure devotees to our home, offer them prasadam, and be prepared to please them in all respects. This is called Bhukte Bojayate Chaiva. Now we're going to go back on the screen here and we'll talk a little bit about this. There we are. This very important aspect of devotional service. Bearing in mind, Nectar of Instruction is instructions for neophyte devotees. How a neophyte can come from a neophyte platform to the highest platform, a Nectar of Instruction, in a nutshell, condensed, you could say, in sense of condensed sutras, summarizing or describing nectar of devotion, taking us through the practical path of Vaidhi Bhakti to the highest path, Prema Bhakti. And today's verse is this very important aspect. It's one thing to control one's senses, it's another thing to avoid things which are unfavorable and to practically apply favorable things. And in those 2 verses, we do see to avoid the association of non-devotees and the negative effects of association with non-devotees, and to follow in the footsteps of devotees were mentioned. And today, practically speaking, what do we do in the association of devotees? And serving in the association of devotees, what these 6 items mentioned here, loving exchanges. It's not just about, we're not robots, we're not machines, just living our lives and just doing things together. That's obviously there to in certain aspects, you could say we just go about our daily chores, our daily services, but there's not a very deep interaction. maybe only on the basis of the practical service itself. So today, Rupa Goswami is giving us some advice, some practical advice also, on how we can deepen relationships with devotees. And of course, it's related. This is meant to be related to topics concerning Krishna consciousness, and not just mundane topics. We've already passed through that stage. We're supposed to have done. Now, how to properly or favorable association of devotees. This is one of the I've forgotten the English word, but one of the main pillars of our growth, awakening of our faith in devotional service, increasing our faith, and helping us to develop a relish in Krishna consciousness. Without developing a taste in Krishna consciousness somewhere along the line, then it's very hard to become disinterested in the whatever type of taste we're getting in the material world. So taste in Krishna consciousness is also something which is relished or experienced in the association of devotees. At least it should be. If the relationship or the interaction is appropriate, then that will be, at least in due course of time, that will be an effect of proper associating with devotees. So I'm going to, one of the foundations of practically the foundation of the growth of our Krishna consciousness movement is how we interact with each other, how devotees respect each other, how devotees put their own selfish interests aside and the interest of the Acharya, the interest of the spiritual masters, and our line of disciplic succession, and ultimately Krishna's desire in the center. So I'm going to show one or two things. If you can allow me to share screen, please. If I can have screen sharing, Masika.
It should be possible now, Maharaj.
Can you see it?
Not yet.
It says host is disabled. Try again.
I've made you the co-host, Maharaj, so you should have all facilities.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, yes, Maharaj.
Back, what is it? In Tompkins Square Park in 1966. Amazing how Srila Prabhupada came to the West from a very different culture, a very different upbringing in every respect, or many respects, let's say, contrary to the mood and the philosophy of Western society. The Prabhupada came to the West, and with Krishna in the center, and his spiritual master's instruction in the center, was able to reciprocate loving exchanges with anybody, even persons who were inimical, practically still, because from their point of view, maybe not. His point of view, there was this understanding was obviously there that every living entity is the eternal servant of Krishna. But a way of communication, because Srila Prabhupada's center was Krishna. And when we have ourselves in the center, then we have no end of, let's say, friends and enemies. People who are compatible to our conditioning, we may call friends, and people who are not, we may call enemies. Or we may just ignore them. But Srila Prabhupada, because Krishna's in the center, he sees how everybody is meant to be serving Krishna. Therefore, somehow or another, for Krishna's pleasure, how to engage this living entity in Krishna's service. Here's Prabhupada sitting in Tompkins Square Park, engaging whoever comes along, unknowingly, agyata sukriti, but giving them the chance to engage in Krishna service. And that was Prabhupada's mood always, no matter who people were. He would always relate to them in a way as to somehow or another connect their conditioning to Krishna. And this is really how we can develop real love. Love in this material world, it's a reflection of the love, liberty, lakshana, the loving exchanges on the spiritual platform are reflected in this world. But unfortunately, they're with ourselves in the center. We're trying to enjoy our senses, and we're seeing everything as an object of my pleasure, more or less. And people, we get upset if they don't, let's say, relate to me in a way which is favorable to my concepts of life. And in this way, the world goes on with its wars and its quarrels, and especially in this age of Kali, and its dissension, and so much family turmoil, and social turmoil, national turmoil between so-called religions, within so-called religions. Every level there is this, lack of depth in relationship, based on the surface in most cases, and you can become an enemy overnight, practically speaking, with someone you thought you were a friend with, because we're not actually having a relationship with a person. The relationship is with the external form, karmic form of that person, subtle and gross. So to develop genuine relationships on the spiritual platform. So let's have a look at another slide. And this is a famous, very famous statement. It's not actually directly spoken like this by Srila Prabhupada. It's over a series of sentences. This is you could say that captures the essence of Prabhupada's statements. Your love for me will be shown how you work and cooperate together. Work and cooperate. The word cooperate is a very interesting word. Sometimes we take it to mean do what I say, cooperate with me, please. And this is not the spiritual meaning of the word cooperate. And the material word, it may be coercive form of cooperate, but that's not the meaning at all. It means cooperate. We all individuals, we all have our unique individuality. As Prabhupada described in our Krishna consciousness movement, he even requested our GBC members, not only the GBC, everyone, to come annually to Mayapur and to discuss this point. The main point of coming together is unity in diversity. And that is a challenge. We all know what a challenge that is. Even with in our own hearts, it's a challenge, what to speak of interacting with others. But unity in diversity, diversity is meant to be there. We're not clones. We may be clowns, but we're not clones. Every individual has a unique individual, every single atom, every single cell, whatever it is, they have a unique individuality. We may not be able to perceive it with our limited senses, but every living entity has its own individual uniqueness, whatever species it may be. This is the nature of the Krishna's energies, unlimited energies with their own unique individuality. And the unity, so that's diversity is quite easy to see in this world, although we may try to make it kind of, dissolve that unity and make everything one. Impersonal philosophy is also applied materially, trying to make people what they're not, trying to mold them the way we want people to be, etc. But that's not how it's meant to be. Loving exchanges is how to bring out our uniqueness in relationship with Krishna, and not to try to manipulate someone else's uniqueness or to dismantle someone else's uniqueness, but rather to how to and bring it out in a favorable way, Kulyena Krishnana, in relationship with Krishna. This is the meaning of loving, we'll say this, the effect of loving exchanges is that we may be what we are, according to our karma in this world. We identify with our body and mind, which is karmic, but nonetheless, that is our present condition. And we try to engage that in relationship with Krishna. This brings about the unity. The more that Krishna is in the center, it's not so much about having some kind of platform of speculative philosophy of how to be united in some way or another based upon some morality or something that is automatically there in any kind of human society anyway. But that's not the real essence. That doesn't stand. It doesn't perpetuate. It's only a relative endeavor. It may be tinged with a little mode of goodness, but it's only relative. The absolute unity is what we will not get beyond that platform. In other words, if we don't actually apply the absolute process, which is indicated in today's verse. Again, in materially, Prabhupada will go on to explain that even in ordinary material dealings, people interact like this. They interact in business and so on by exchanging gifts and what have you. But in Krishna consciousness, that's there, but it's not based upon getting something out of the other person, materially speaking, maybe spiritually, yes. But it's based upon trying to please Krishna. It's based upon trying to serve the devotees, encourage the devotees, etc. Another verse, from Prabhupada. Now, all my disciples must work combinedly and with cooperation to spread the Sankirtan movement. If you cannot work together, then my work is stopped up. Our society is like one big family, and our relationship should be based on love and trust. We must give up the fighting spirit and use our intelligence to push ahead. You should accept help from your godbrothers. Fairly early letter, Prabhupada is writing, we all know how difficult it is sometimes to work together. One of the hardest things in our lives is relationships. And we're talking about devotees, we'll keep it primarily to that arena. But relationships amongst devotees is the most favorable or savory, tasty, and it can be the most disturbing also. Either way, it can be, or something. And to cultivate relationships which are actually favorable and pleasing takes a bit of humility, takes a lot of tolerance, a lot of respect, a lot of effort, endeavor. As much of the time we don't know each other. I was talking the other day to some older devotees, a group of older devotees here in France, and they honestly concluded that they didn't really know each other. They'd just been acting and relating on a very superficial platform of achievement. Oh, you're good, you're not good, according to what you do or don't do, or what you say about me or don't say about me, or who you like and who you don't like, and so on and so forth. What your nature is and what have you, externally. But they never really went beyond the surface, at least that was their perspective, and to get to know each other. So it takes a little bit of humility to become honest, honesty, to go beyond the external show, which the material world is very prominent in the material world. We it's a bit of an external show, a facade. So to remove the facade and to actually become free of that. As long as we have a facade in our relationships or anything, then fear will always be there. Fear of being detected, fear of being criticized, fear of loss, etc., etc. Because we haven't understood the nature of the self, or we're denying it. Killing the self is the word used in the Upanishad. We're just identifying ourselves entirely with what we're not and trying to impress others with what we're not. And naturally, there's therefore so much mistrust, so much anxiety, so much fear, so much pain, and so on. And it's a very unpleasant situation for the soul. So the practice of devotional service is to try to dissolve that facade or remove that facade, but it has to be based on honest dealings and not with some hidden agendas or manipulative agendas, which are often the case, but rather with a genuine intent to become, let's say, what word shall we use for this, but genuinely relieved of one's false ego. And Prabhupada himself one time said, if you really want to enjoy in this material world, then a man and a woman have to be naked. And he said, similarly, the soul, we have to be naked, freed of all these false agendas, all these anarthas, all these false sarva upadi vinirmuktam tat padadvena nirmalam. Famous verse from Nectar of Devotion. How devotional service, when properly applied, removes all these sarva upadis. The upadis are the various false identities that we all have, which block any genuine awakening of love and trust. Love and trust is always frustrated in this world. And as long as we approach Krishna consciousness with a material agenda, we'll also have a similar experience in our Krishna consciousness, that we become disheartened. We lose our, why is Krishna doing this to me, and so on and so forth. He's doing it so that we can become freed of our material agendas, our material perspectives, our false understanding of who we are, etc. Otherwise, we would continue in this illusion of thinking, I am this body, I am this mind, I am the center of the universe, I am the enjoyer. And the proof is that I'm enjoying, I'm having a good time in this material world. Therefore, I must be a good devotee, and so on. All kinds of falsities come up in our mind. So Krishna doesn't want us to stay in this illusion of identity. So he, out of his mercy, he reciprocates lovingly to try to release us from this. And in the association of devotees also, we'll find our false ego is oftentimes challenged, often, not always challenged. And we may not recognize it, but it's always being challenged in a sense, because everyone's in a similar kind of circle. Some devotees, some people are advanced more, obviously, but there's always a relative amount of false ego involved. And therefore, there's always some kind of, say, trickery game, dishonesty, something going on there in the relationships. But that has to be changed. And that's the process of devotional service. So taking help, a little humility there from others. And that doesn't just mean, can you help me to do what I'm doing? Help means to point out sometimes our shortcomings in our understanding or whatever, or application of devotional service, our attitude, whatever it is. Taking help from others is one big family. And in any family, materially speaking, also, we see that there are so many individuals in the family and sometimes there's misunderstandings, etc. But because it's a family, there's still some connection. So we should remember that. But although we have our differences and misunderstandings, sometimes we are nonetheless one big family. And then the more we put the Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and the Parampara in the center, the more we put Krishna in the center, the less disharmony, the less friction there will be. So working cooperatively means, or combinedly, it doesn't mean we're all sheep. It means that, we're all playing our part like in a great orchestra, but we're working combinedly for a harmonious effect or for the pleasure of Krishna. So somebody may be very good or inclined towards making flowers, somebody may be for farming, gardening, somebody may be for chanting, hearing, remembering, worshipping. All the 9 limbs of devotional service are there, and many subcategories within each limb are there, and different devotees will be at different stages, attracted to different aspects of devotional service. play that part nicely, or maybe out of circumstances we're engaged in certain activities, etc., and someone else is engaged in a different activity, but it should be harmonious because it should be Krishna in the center. Not that my service is better than your service. We were reading yesterday, Srila Prabhupada was describing, and while we're hearing actually in a lecture, how everyone's service is not that the devotee in the garden service is any less than the devotee on the altar. They're both equal in the eye of Krishna. And Prabhupada said, even if an ant crawls on the altar, if an ant crawls on the lotus feet of the deity and smells the lotus feet of the deity, or a flower on the lotus feet of the deity, that ant's service is as good as the Bajara's. So we shouldn't be proud of our service that I'm doing better of someone else or whatever. We should feel maybe privileged that we have this opportunity and be respectful towards the efforts of others to render service. It's not always so easy as that there's attitude and, interactions going on, and pride and what have you. But that's you could say on the service platform, our present service platform, this verse, Trinadapi Sinichine Tororapi Sahishana, to apply this verse in our daily services is not always so easy. We don't even probably remember, but that's the point. Now we could go on and on. I'll show one or two more. We've got dozens and dozens of similar verses here. Our society is devotees. We should not only practice to love God, but we should make friendship and love the devotees also. So we've just seen how to love the devotees on a practical way. And that will go deeper and deeper the more we have trust in each other. Trust, love, and trust. Prabhupada uses the word trust. That's a very big subject, isn't it? It's easy to say, yes, I trust you, but how deep is that trust? How deep is it? And it cannot be very deep in the material world because everything's changing all the time. It's external to the soul. So that real trust is when we're actually getting closer to Krishna consciousness. Then trust may develop. Of course, we can analyze that from many angles for the other person's behavior, their credibility, their non-duplicity, their straightforwardness, and so on and so forth. You can use many different ways of applying it, but in principle, as we go deeper and deeper, and there is no ill intent in the relationship, one genuinely wants to help the other devotee, or one generally has faith in the other devotee's direction, etc., etc. Easy to break in this material world, hard to develop. And it takes time. So Prabhupada wanted this love and trust in our movement. But again and again, unfortunately, because we put ourselves in the center, there is disappointment. We think that we're the owner, that we're the enjoyer, that we're the friend. The Krishna is Bhoktara Nyagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's the friend, proprietor. He's the owner. He's the lover. He's the object of our service, everything. Only then can we actually have real peace. And the more this is cultivating, this mood, then the more we'll have naturally love and trust will develop within our hearts. Even though we have our differences, we may not agree, but we trust that we're not acting in a way that is with an ulterior motive, with a mundane motive. It is the nature of the soul to not only intensely love Krishna, but also to intensely love his devotees. Indeed, Krishna wants us to be devotees of his devotees, not his direct devotees. Again, the importance of humility and respect in our dealings, our loving exchanges. And this is an example. Of course, this is transcendental and has its transcendental purpose. But we can see how even amongst family members, sometimes it can go a bit overboard. More than a bit overboard. I mean, this, of course, led plan of the Lord, the removal of the Yadu dynasty from the planet. But sometimes amongst ourselves, we get quite rough sometimes, especially when we're intoxicated, as they were. It doesn't mean intoxicated with liquor or something like that, but intoxicated with our own false identity, our own attachments, etc., our own desires, what I want. It's more or less everyone's intoxicated with that to different degrees. So that leads to the danger of misunderstanding, the danger of quarrel, etc. And it can be quite destructive, to say the least. As Prabhupada himself said, that this movement cannot be stopped from outside. It can only be, stopped from inside when we start to quarrel, like in the Gaudiya Math, pretty much Prabhupada uses as an example after the departure of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. So there were many factions within the Gaudiya Math fighting with each other over property, over leadership, over this and that. Typical example of putting the acharya out of the center and putting oneself in the center. But it's a common thing. What is this? Don't know. There's nothing. Doesn't look like anything. Oh, I know what it is, but I don't think I can show this. This is a video. I don't think we can show it. Doesn't look like it. Here's a funny video. I won't talk about it. All of you come to see me every year, Prabhupada said. No, the Lord said. Sorry, Prabhupada also said. The Lord said, to come here and then return must certainly give you great trouble. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Jagannath Puri after taking sannyas. He wanted all the devotees to come and see him from Bengal. To come here and then return must certainly give you great trouble. I would like to forbid you to do this, but I enjoy your company so much that my desire for your association only increases. I ordered Sri Nityananda Prabhu not to leave Bengal, but he has transgressed my order and come to see me. What can I say? What can you say? And that's the idea of, like, for instance, temples. They should be so attractive we want to go. Not that, hey, Prabhu, can you come and do something? Prabhu, we need your help. That may be there sometimes. We're not so, let's say, pure. We may not be so understanding, but it should be that we would want to go to the temple. We want to engage in service. We want to hear from devotees. We want to chant the holy names. We want to serve prasadam. We want to do all these things. And the more that these desires are developing, not that we have to be bribed, paid, coerced, or whatever it is, we're just doing it for a show. Look how good I'm doing, more service than anyone else, No, not like that. It should be it should be becoming a genuine, at least an understanding that this is what I need to do. It's for everyone's benefit, especially mine. If we're still a bit self-centered, we definitely should see that much. It's for releasing us from this material illusion, which causes all the problems. So, this enthusiasm for engaging in service, or going to the temple, or associating with devotees. What a great opportunity Krishna's giving me to become purified. A great opportunity to hear, etc. That's what the temple's supposed to be, holy dhams, places to go where we remember Krishna, feel inspired. So here we see the devotees, they're all so eager to go to, they have their duties in Bengal, but they're eager every year to go to Puri to get this opportunity to associate with Lord Chaitanya. This eager, this opportunity for service. Thank you, Prabhu, for engaging me in service. I'm so fortunate. Instead of, that would be nice for me. Instead of, why are you always asking me to do service? Why don't you ask someone else? Or why don't you just do it yourself? Why are you always asking me? Well, okay. But actually, in a sense, it's actually good fortune. We should realize that Krishna is very kind. He's asking us to engage in service. I was going to say, it was just you, it's just for you, it's not, we may have this mentality also. But ultimately, we should see it as an opportunity to serve Krishna, to clean wash the pots, to clean the floor, to clean the windows, to serve prasadam, to whatever it is, to do the temple accounts, to go out and distribute books, to chant Hare Krishna in public or wherever, whatever it is. But see, this is a golden opportunity to awaken our dormant loving affection for Krishna, which is in our hearts. It's awoken. Awoken through Shavananandi Shudachite Kari Udai. It's awoken by hearing and chanting and service. So wonderful. And especially in the association of devotees, we learn this. How enthusiastic, I mean, we probably all had this experience when we first come, how enthusiastic we saw devotees running around, enthusiastically engaging, cleaning and chanting while they clean and cooking and this and that. Very blissful. When Jayananda Prabhu, devotees who were there, so fortunate devotees who were there with Jayananda. I mean, I've never had his association knowledge anyway. Maybe I saw him, I don't know. But I never had his association. But hearing from those who did, we see how unfortunate we were not to get his association. How he would so enthusiastically engage in any service the devotees asked him to do. He was twice the age of the other devotees, senior in terms of being in the movement, much more qualified. But he would serve under any situation. He would faithfully serve the leaders, faithfully, whatever was required. He wouldn't question it. He would just happily try to help them and serve them in such a way, whether it was cleaning out the garbage or fixing vehicles, or whether it was going to the market to get vegetables and fruits and flowers or whatever, or whether it was going on Sankirtan or in the temple, kirtan or cooking, whatever, cleaning. Every service to him was the greatest good fortune. He would relish it. And anyone who came around him would automatically feel that enthusiasm and the relish for engaging in service. It wouldn't I hope they go soon so I can get out of here. I've done my hour. I got to get out, and this is too much, Sometimes this unfortunate conditioning overcomes us. But it's a spirit of genuine enthusiasm. And I'm not saying, not like clock in and clock out, like when we go to work, or measuring our degree of, I did so much service for ISKCON, what have I got out of it? Yes, you haven't got anything out of it because we've not realized a single thing. Plowing away with the anchor. The anchor's in the ground. What have I, me in the center all the time? The purpose of devotional service is that we do get out of it. It's not what we get out of it, it's whether we get out of it. We've got to get out of this mentality, not try to apply this mentality to get something out of devotional service. It's a rather a different mentality, we could say. It takes time for this transformation, and that's the idea of association with devotees, of being honest, of opening one's heart in confidence, not that we go in public and start, putting our dirty clothes out in public necessarily. That's not the method, but in confidence, in public. And that's, of course, a subject matter in of itself. We'll talk more about that next week, of the association, how to do that, how to reveal one's heart in confidence, how, with who, and in what sense do we mean reveal one's heart in confidence. It's not that we just talk all about nonsense, etc., but how we can become free of our attachments, how we can actually awaken a genuine attraction towards devotional service, understanding, respecting other devotees, understanding the situation we're in relationship with Krishna, etc., etc. Not just trying to accommodate our, attachments or our particular way of seeing things, and expecting everyone else to fit into it. It's not exactly how it works. It's on the baby platform only. But as a baby grows up, it's expected to become more conscious of other living entities and not only conscious of its own needs. As a baby has only one thing, its own needs in mind. It doesn't have any sensitivity or concern of the needs of others. But you expect the baby to grow up. And as the baby grows up, a human evolvement, they're supposed to become sensitive of other living entities and conscious of the needs of others besides themselves also. So in devotional service, that has to be there. We'll just read one more, and then we'll go on. Out of his causeless mercy upon me, Advaitacharya has also come here. I'm indebted to him for his affectionate behavior. This debt is impossible for me to liquidate. All my devotees come here just for me. leaving aside their homes and families, they travel by very difficult paths to come here in great haste. There is no fatigue or trouble for me, for I stay here in Nilachal, Jagannath Puri, and do not move at all. This is the favor of all of you, to see others, to put others in the center rather than, putting ourselves in the center here, recognizing the sacrifice of others, seeing the good qualities in others, etc., not just seeing ourselves in that position. Now, what is our time? It's 10 o'clock, okay? So I'm going to go back now to the Nectar of Instruction. We can close this now and stop here. And we're back on the screen, I think. I request all of you, if you're going to be with us next week, to read the purport to this text 4 and try to meditate on it and see how it's relevant in our lives. And just a little bit of internal thought applied there. And in relationship to, maybe we can look at Srila Prabhupada's life also, and see how much Srila Prabhupada applied these various loving exchanges. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was on a certain level of devotional service, and we were on another level, so the loving exchanges were appropriate to our level, you could say. May not have been so deep as they could have been, but they were nonetheless there on a level which was appropriate to our needs, just like when we relate to our kids, our children, we relate on the level which is appropriate to them. They're little children, we don't talk about, love affairs and things like that because they're not mature yet. When they come to maturity, parents may need to talk to their children a little bit about, what do they call it? The bees and the birds and the bees, and whatever. Because the child is faced with this suddenly, with this this new thing, and it's quite heavy sometimes. So a little different change there, maybe in the depth or the discussions or the revelations that we share as we progress. That's why just said Svajati, association with devotees, are on a similar wavelength, a similar nature is favorable. Or those who are more advanced, they associate on a wavelength which we're on, favorable to our progress in spiritual lives. Association is not just, I'm up, you're down, and, you're made to feel like you're down because the other person talks way above our heads, or, whatever like that, has a pace of service 100 times faster than us and makes us feel we're useless. No, but they acted like Prabhupada. He came down to, well, he never came down in one sense, but he acted in such a way as that we could follow. When he was in 2nd Avenue or in Frederick Street in San Francisco or wherever he was showing and teaching and encouraging according to the level of maturity of the devotees. So this is association. Whether it was, words, or whether it was discussing topics, or whether it was prasadam or whatever, it was on a level where devotees could relate. It's like in New York, probably say, eat more, eat more, eat more. How many chapatis? Give him more chapatis, give her more chapatis. 10, 12, 15 chapatis sometimes. Prabhupada was, loving exchanges. He knew what was appropriate to inspire or to awaken a spark of devotion in that person, or an attraction towards Krishna consciousness. So, because he was absolutely in Krishna consciousness, we're not. So we may not be so expert in that. We're still attracted to our own sense gratification. So even in giving instructions to others, sometimes it's misunderstood. It's not doesn't have such good effect sometimes. It's just work in progress. I'll just read one paragraph here in Prabhupada's. It's a long paragraph, a part of the paragraph in the Nectar of Instruction. Even in ordinary social activities, there are these 6 types of dealings between 2 loving friends are absolutely necessary. For instance, when one businessman wishes to contact another businessman, he arranges a feast in a hotel, and over the feast, they openly expresses what he wishes to do. He then inquires from the business friend how he should act, and sometimes presents presents or exchange gifts. Thus, whenever there is a dealing of priti, love and intimate dealings, these 6 activities are executed. You could say that in the case of a boy and a girl, the boy brings the girl maybe some flowers or something, to try to please the girlfriend, something like that. The girlfriend may give the boy something too. Although it's mundane, it's reflective, these principles still apply. And over a feast, he expresses what he wishes to do. He then inquires from his business friend how he should act, and sometimes presents are exchanged. Thus, whenever there is a dealing of pretty and love and intimate dealings, these 6 activities are executed. In the previous verse, Sri Rupa Goswami advised one should renounce worldly association and keep company with devotees, Sangha Tyagat Satovate. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. It's a very important line or sentence, we could say. The purpose of ISKCON's being established is to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. This society was started single-handedly, but because people are coming forward and dealing with the give and take policy, the society is now expanding all over the world. We are glad that people are donating very liberally to the development of the society's activities, and people are also eagerly accepting whatever humble contribution we are giving them in the shape of books and magazines dealing strictly with the subject matter of Krishna consciousness. We sometimes hold Hare Krishna festivals and invite life members and friends to participate in the feasting by accepting prasadam. Although most of our members come from the higher rungs of society, they nonetheless come and take whatever little prasad we are able to offer them. Sometimes the members and supporters inquire very confidentially about the methods of performing devotional service, and we try to explain this. In this way, our society is successfully spreading all over the world, and the intelligentsia of all countries is gradually appreciating our Krishna conscious activities. So this is particularly referring to, we can go off the book now, back to the open screen or whatever. This is specifically, Prabhupada was writing this in reference to what was going on in India, where there were life members, Indian members of the public coming to our programs and gradually becoming impressed, attracted. Because in those days in the West, most of the devotees, you could say they came from the higher rungs, but they weren't behaving like it. They were mostly hippies and rejects in many cases, not all, but in many cases. But whatever it is, this is the purpose of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, to facilitate these loving exchanges between devotees. And you should try to reflect on this and how we can progress in this regards. And Prabhupada is again talking in this purport, you could say, on a very practical basis, relevant to the situation that the devotees are on. And we see if we read the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings of Lord Chaitanya, you can see different conversations there and different degrees of confidentiality in the conversations, especially with Ramananda Roy, for instance. Very deep. The Chankazi is not mentioned in there, but we see when the Chankazi, for instance, came to, when Lord Chaitanya came to the Chankazi's house in Mayapur, how the Chankazi was wanting to talk separately with Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya said, no, these are all my confidential associates. You have nothing to fear. When there's confidence there, even in practical dealings, we say he's very confident. He's not very afraid. So when we say confidential, that means there's nothing to be afraid of in our relationship, in our dealings, in our conversation. There's nothing to fear because confidentiality is there. One can confide in somebody. There's no ulterior motive. There's only a desire to favorable desire to help, etc. Okay, so I'm going to finish there because for various reasons, I'm going to finish talking there. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. There's nothing there right now. Any questions? Maybe you can speak them if it's too late to chat them. Something's come on. There's a question. Under what circumstances can I refuse the service given to me? Interesting. Well, usually we ask the other question the other way around. You know, how can I engage in the service given to me? So sounds like you're having some hard time there with somebody is asking you to do something which is inappropriate. Well, of course, it depends on the source of who's asking you to do a service, for instance. There's one angle is you may have been in a situation where one has to see who one's authority is, if one has one authority in devotional service, who one's following, and then someone else asks you to do service which interferes with that other service. And in that particular case, you may not, it's not like you're doing a service asked for one by the temple manager or something. And then somebody else comes along and they say, "Hey, Prabhu, can you clean my shoes?" I say, "I'd love to clean your shoes, but I've been asked by the management to do this other service. If you would please be very kind to ask the management if you want me to clean your shoes, I'll do that, no problem, but I can't stop doing what I'm doing for the management." So that would be one angle of it, but I think the main angle of this is when we're asked to do something in general. Is there a state? Well, if it's something which is, again, it's a sensible one, because who are we to say? But if it's going to impair one's health, if it's going to impair someone else's health, if it's against the regulated principles, for sure. If it's a deviation from Shastra, if it's against the temple management's, if we're in a temple situation, and then if we're working in cooperation with the temple, if it's against their principle or their program, and if it's just causing us to, lose all of our enthusiasm. But we don't just say, "I'm not doing it," usually. We usually try to, discuss my problems in executing this service. It's not that someone says, "No, I'm not doing it." No, it's not usually like that. It's more like, "Dear Prabhu, I love," or "Dear Mataji," whatever. Yeah, I very much would wish I could do this, but I'm, whatever. We then explain what our situation is usually, if there's a reason for not doing the service. Sometimes you may be so tired. Sometimes there may be many reasons. And it's not so that we refuse. We never refuse service. That's refuse and refuse are basically coming from the same source, garbage. We throw it away. We never throw it away, but sometimes we have to use our common sense in terms of, what is favorable, what we can do, and not imitate, not try to do what others are doing necessarily. We cannot imitate. We're conditioned. We have our limits. We have our natures. So little common sense has to be there. And again, it's some of the other points which I've already mentioned in terms of, let's say, unauthorized situations, or situations which are a threat to one's own health or threat to the health of others, a threat in various ways, then we have to discuss it. There should be discussion there, a form of discussion as to what is favorable. Another one, thank you. What is the secret of, there's another one before that. And before, health issues, mental troubles, job or family problems, or a better way I could ask, how to prioritize my life around service. Thank you. Good one. Well, this is a follow-on. Sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, follow-up to that previous point. This is why we need a Sangha, association of devotees who actually are concerned with each other's welfare and advancement in spiritual life, and not just a Sangha of devotees trying to utilize each other or trying to just achieve external objectives, but a deeper concern to the individuals. The whole purpose of external objectives is to help the individual to progress in spiritual life. It's not like it's not like in our material world where it may be to feather our false egos that I am the greater proprietor or controller than you, but to know everything we do and the objectives which we follow are all for this purpose, to help the individual to become Krishna conscious, to progress. And in our movement, everywhere in the world, everyone is different, even in health, mentally and physically, in their abilities, everyone is different. In our conditioning, consequent attractions and distractions are all different. And mentally speaking, some people are mentally challenged, some people are physically challenged more than normal. And that's not a disqualification for Krishna consciousness at all. It may be a disqualification for performing certain activities, not the same way that others do them, but it's not. If there's sincerity in the heart, in the association of devotees, it's how to encourage that sincerity in the heart in a Krishna conscious way, and not to try to put people down because they have health issues or even mental issues, finding a place where that person may be encouraged. We may not be able to be honest, but as much as possible, encourage everyone to engage in devotional service some way or another. So if someone's asking us to do something we cannot possibly do, or it results in a disaster, then when we should have a little bit more common sense. We should also have a little bit more compassion, etc., etc. But in principle, these points are discussed in the association of devotees. Please accept, okay. Should we relate in the same way with devotees from other movements, philosophies? There's different ways, and again, you'll find that in our Nectar of Instruction and the next verses, which we'll be discussing. This subject matter will come up. How to relate lovingly, and it is different. It is different. The intention may be the same, how to bring people to Krishna consciousness. It may be, in a neophyte stage, how to protect myself from being deviated from Krishna consciousness. They may both be going on in our neophyte stage. So how we relate to other movements or other branches of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's with the same intent, to please Krishna, to not be offensive, etc., to encourage others to become Krishna conscious. But the details will, generally speaking, be different. They'll generally be different. So, like confidential exchanges for jati, those who have something very close in common, very close. But there will still be a certain amount of that on a certain level, like giving prasadam, but we may not receive. It's a sensitive one. It's a sensitive one because loving exchanges is two ways. But so one has to use a little bit of care and common sense there. How to exchange with one's family members who may be not vegetarian, for instance. It may be these things are a little sensitive details you've discussed amongst each other, amongst devotees, how to apply. This is too big a subject to get into detail on that. But in principle, it's different. How we relate is different. They want to talk about other things. So Prabhupada was pretty expert in this. And even when it came to giving and taking, people would come sometimes to Prabhupada and give him something they made, and Prabhupada wouldn't refuse it, at least in the beginning. He would take it, but he wouldn't eat it. He would just put it aside somewhere. And what he did with it, I don't know, but he would accept the offering. He would accept it like that, but he wouldn't necessarily eat it, or immediately do something with it. But there was an exchange there. He would sometimes relate to what their subject matter of interest was, but then gradually bring it around to Krishna consciousness. He wouldn't waste time. He wouldn't indulge in their mundane or otherwise activity or whatever. He would be careful to bring it, not to lose, let's say, the goal of association, to put Krishna in the center. Where are we now? regarding relieving our mind, should we not be careful in revealing our mind to someone experienced only, revealing otherwise maybe not? Try to understand this question. Regarding relieving our mind, revealing, I think we mean, revealing our mind, should we not be careful in revealing our mind to someone experienced only, revealing otherwise maybe naivety? Yes, we do have to be a little careful there, and usually it's, of course, there are some persons who's, in these days, who are professionals, we may or may not want to reveal our mind to. It definitely has to be someone we just have trust in. I mean, sometimes you can feel that, and you can feel it in your heart. There's something in the heart where you feel very close. It's called svajati. You can feel a very closeness with each other. And you may reveal certain things, but not all things. Because we never reveal all things, but relevant, let's say. We may reveal some relevant things with certain people, but not all. And then other people, we may reveal more relevant things. Depends on the subject matter and the other person's position or situation and how we get along in that particular area. And on the highest platform, of course, it comes to Krishna, pure devotional service. So obviously we have to reveal our hearts ultimately to a pure devotee. But in peers, we reveal our hearts with their closest associates, etc. But there has to be common sense. So we're not just because someone's experienced and they're an older devotee. No, that's not the point. The point is you have to have, trust in that person, confidential trust. And that's something which grows in time. Revealing. Thank you for that. What is corrected there? Anything else? Well, it is an important subject, and if we're allowed, we'll carry on with it next week. And in the meantime, if you have the time, please read the purport. I'm sure you have the time. We had the wonderful occasion of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's appearance day a few days ago, and in the evening we were discussing about some of his statements on chanting the holy names. How many devotees were saying, I can't finish my rounds. Because they had 64 round quota daily, 64 rounds, and then he couldn't finish it. So they would say, no time. And he would say, I know how much time you've got. You have so much time for gossiping, but you have no time for chanting. So much gossip. We have so much time sometimes on the mobile phone, text, and no time for chanting. So we can always find time if we really want to. So we try to develop. In the association of devotees, this can be inspired to how we can more time for hearing and chanting, help each other to hear and chant. Many of our problems are not really problems at all. They're just forgetfulness, total forgetfulness of who we are, who is Krishna, and etc., etc. So that reminding in the association of devotees, who are we? Who is Krishna? What does devotional service mean? What is my constitution? How can I awaken it? These type of things in the association of devotees become easier to be conscious of, to remember. And when we're not in the association, we have a tendency to become a little self-centered. And sometimes that not being in the association of devotees can actually bring us more eagerness to be in the association too. But we should be at least eager to associate with devotees. The point is to become eager. I had a question which got skipped, is it? Let me see, there's a couple more questions here. Okay, here it is. What is the secret of appreciating other people's service, whatever small it may be? How should we reciprocate for the service? It's a good one. When we appreciate our own service, and see how fortunate we are, and thinking that this is a gift of the Lord, and not just because I'm good, therefore I'm doing this and that, and we're proud of it. As long as pride is there when we say pride, we talk in terms of self-centered pride, then appreciation of the service is not genuine. It's only relative. So as long as our heart is covered with pride, we may, scratch other people's backs. Very well done, just so that they start to worship us or follow us or whatever we want to call it, do what we want, etc. But it's not deep. It's not genuine. And in due course of time, you'll see that that breaks. But when there's pridelessness in our service, when we're no more doing our service hoping to get some recognition or some returns for our service, and it's becoming more and more genuinely, you can say, constitutional, then naturally we'll appreciate everything because we'll see how everything is connected to Krishna, how every living entity, even an ant, is connected to Krishna. That's a high level of appreciation, a high level of perception or consciousness, there's no doubt about that. So we follow somebody who has that level of consciousness, that purity, that Krishna consciousness, etc. We follow them, and by following them, then gradually, if we want, that is. If we don't want, that's something else. But if we want to actually become Krishna conscious, gradually transformation will take place, and we'll begin to respect and appreciate others more and more and more. I'm studying Prabhupada's books, chanting carefully the holy names of Krishna, we'll gradually appreciate more and more and more the service rendered by others. But as long as we have pride and other unwanted character, then it's very hard to really to genuinely appreciate the service. Well, we become envious instead of happy to see others' service. We should be happy. This is like if you've got children. Many of you have children or have had children. And, you're very happy when you see your child make its first step or say its first word or eat its first grains or whatever it is. It's great joy to the heart of a parent. Great joy. And so similarly, as Prabhupada said, we're one big family. So when we see anyone in the family doing any little service, we should be very, very happy to encourage them. Wonderful, they said Krishna's name. They cleaned a pot, whatever it is. Wonderful. They distributed one magazine. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The more we put in Krishna in the center and less ourselves, the more that will happen naturally. Because Krishna, the Father, is very happy to see that little service of the babies. But if we're fighting like kids, my service is better than you, get out the way, oh yeah, very good. But then we're trying to exploit them or something. It's not good. Okay, who's next? Rishikesh, Punjabi Bag. Due to false ego, being myself in the center, I feel unhappy, discouraged in seva, but in some seva, I feel encouraged. So in discounting, dropping some seva which disturbs my balance of sadhana and health, is okay or not? You told us to see seva as mercy. Is it okay? It's not a matter of comfort. Please guide. Yeah, this is a very common scenario. Some of us are perhaps more fortunate in a sense, in another sense not, that some devotees are just whatever you say, Prabhu, and they're happy in the way they go. Maybe completely surrendered, maybe not, but they're like that. But many persons are not right for various reasons. It may be because of mental difficulty, it may be because of physical difficulty, it may be because of lack of maturity, lack of surrender, it may be many reasons, whatever they are. But in the beginning, really we're talking in the beginning of practical devotional service, it is one of the aspects of a society is to engage people according to their condition and not against their condition. And Prabhupada would do the same thing. He would engage people according to their propensity, but if a devotee was a little bit maybe in a position where they could take more, he would often engage them not according to their propensity, because we tend to be attached to our propensity. And, but in the beginning, that's natural. It's natural that one will do that. The one will, a person's naturally inclined to someone, even from the practical point of view, it would be a natural thing to do, to engage them in specific services. And if a person is miserable in one service and happy in another, it's another common sense thing. And then gradually, as they perform the service which they're happy in, the idea is that they'll progress, they'll advance in Krishna consciousness and not be so dependent upon the results of the activity. But if you purposely make someone do a service they really, really feel miserable about, they're not going to stay. They're going to go away. So what is the gain? There is no gain. So it has to be seen according to the capacity of the receiver, not so much just the activity, but the effect at what level the person is on, and how they digest it, and they become enthusiastic in doing it, etc. Then that's common sense that one is more likely to, if possible, to engage them in that particular activity. There are some activities which are above that or aside from that, which are at a certain point of time required to add and not just do what we feel good at. Like, for instance, tapasya. Tapasya means sometimes undergoing doing things which may not be, from a conditional point of view, what we would normally do. Like getting up early in the morning, or chanting 16 rounds, or preaching, or whatever it may be, following regulated principles. So step by step, these other things will be maybe introduced also step by step, but they will naturally, we expect them to evolve as we go along. Not that we just stay as babies for the rest of our lives, just attached to what we like doing, and that's it, full stop. And we don't really do anything else. That's not bad, but it's not going to take us to the, let's say that the platform where we can really be where we can be happy on the spiritual platform. So there's a bit of, common sense there. How do I understand what service is required from me as a disciple? Did we miss something? Okay. How do I understand what service is required from me as a disciple? Well, I guess if we become a disciple, it will become clear. We often talk about this subject matter of disciple guru, and sometimes with the genuine Acharya said, finding a guru may be difficult, but finding a disciple is even more difficult. To be actually a real disciple is very rare, not to speak of being a guru. No, but putting that aside, in practical sense of the question, and that's again why we have a structure, why Prabhupada established a structure, where we have scriptures. In the Nectar of Devotion, we can read the list of general items of devotional service, and Prabhupada writes there that these are general points, and the details may vary from one spiritual master to the next. So one may get specific instructions. In ISKCON movement, Prabhupada established this movement with certain principles of authority, of direction, and so on and so forth. For the very purpose, as we heard in the very beginning, this Krishna consciousness movement has specifically been established to facilitate these loving exchanges. So that includes rendering service, includes serving together, etc. So generally speaking, if a devotee is working, following the regulated principles, Prabhupada said, and chanting his 16 rounds, that's the basic thing. And there may be exceptions to that also because of circumstances. It doesn't mean that's the end of the world, absolutely. But in general, if one's following those principles and chanting 16 rounds minimum, etc., the spiritual master, Prabhupada writes, is pleased when he sees his disciple following the regulated principles of devotional service. But he's not necessarily pleased when he brings money. Now, what that means is if someone just simply brings money but doesn't follow any principles. Now, there's something pleasing there, but he's more pleased when he sees the devotee following the principles and chanting 16 rounds, etc. And they could go on and on like that. And he's very pleased when he sees devotees working cooperatively together. When they work cooperatively together, trying to help each other, very pleased when you can also ask directly, of course, but the details generally come down to a local level. Cooperate locally, try to push on the movement wherever you are, follow the principles, etc., etc. Hear and chant, read Prabhupada's books, hear his lectures, etc. Attend the festivals, render service, the general things. Details usually are left up to a local level in that way. And for sure, the spiritual master will be pleased. Prabhupada would receive news about his disciples through usually, sometimes directly, sometimes through temple presidents or from other devotees. And he was very pleased to hear that they're serving nicely, cooperatively, that they're sacrificing, surrendering, whatever it is, very happy. Prabhupada was very happy to hear a letter from someone. I started to chant one round a day, etc., depending on the individual situation. But, you know, to find out, you can ask locally also. But anyone who's rendering any service to some degree is pleasing. But if you want to really know, you have to ask details of that, probably on a personal level. How to understand what service is required from me. Oh, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Understand what service is required of me as a disciple, not necessarily what pleases the spiritual master, but what service is required. Again, it's a similar train of thought. What service is required? Ultimately, the service required from us is on the transcendental platform. So right now in our conditioned state, what service is required? I don't know what service is required. The basic general things are there, but what details of service are required locally, that will depend on the local situation, person to person. But as a disciple, the spiritual master would be happy to see the disciple doing, like as we mentioned earlier, trying to work cooperatively, trying to respect other devotees, following the general principles of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, etc. I don't know if there's anything more to that, but it's the general thing. We never really had direct association with Prabhupada in this regards to ask him directly what services. We just accepted the general instructions that Prabhupada gave us and the instructions which fit within the movement to work with the local, in our local situation, and to try to preach Krishna consciousness. Due to this pandemic, we are so far from you. How can we? Well, Prabhupada said you're chanting Hare Krishna on that side of the world. I'm chanting Hare Krishna on this side of the world. And this way we're all packed up together. We're not actually distanced from each other. Sometimes when we're at far distance, we're actually getting more association, closer association than when we're in the same room. I've seen many times we go to a program in the same room and half the devotees are in and out like yo-yos, doing something or another. And because there's another form of association through service. We associate through Vani and we associate through Vapu. And to understand the real Vapu association, the process is through Vani, through service. So whether you're in Delhi or whether you're in Melbourne or wherever we are, in England, wherever it is, the principle is the same. Our real association is with the Prabhupada in the center, and we're trying to serve him. We're trying to please him. And this is in the heart, at least this is how we can say we can bring pleasure to each other by putting Krishna and the Acharya in the center, wherever we are. And that is the purpose of Vapu. The purpose of Vapu is not just to take photographs and to, cry and whatever else it may be. And just, it's also good to have Vapu association with each other, personal association with each other, as long as it's helping us to go forward in our Krishna consciousness. So when we're not in the association, which inevitably will always be the case anyway, because with Prabhupada, of course, he was with us on this planet for so many years in the Vapu form. Now he's with us in the Vani form, and the Vani is more important. To worship the Vani, Prabhupada writes, after the departure of the spiritual master, the genuine, sincere devotee takes the spiritual master's instruction of their life and soul and thinks, how can I execute this instruction? That's how we associate, through meditating and practically applying how we can actually, and in our cases, a movement is based on Prabhupada's instructions. It's not something independent of that. Only small details are independent, you could say, in terms of time, place, and circumstance, but the general principles of following Srila Prabhupada's instructions are the main way that we can please each other and associate. By trying to stick with Prabhupada and stick with his instructions and trying to apply them in our lives. I don't know if there's anything else. I think that's it. Oh, no, there's another one coming. Delhi, we have a lot of nice devotees in Delhi. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of devotees in Delhi. It's an amazing place. When Prabhupada was preaching there in the 40s, it was like no time. Nobody was interested. Nobody. Now we see in Delhi how many hundreds of thousands of devotees are there. Incredible temples and Rath Yatras and books going out by the million. They're just doing books by the million. Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, how pleased Prabhupada is. Bombay, Mayapur, Vrindavan, all temples in India doing so much. But during the 70s, hardly there was a handful of Indian devotees, hardly. Struggling. Mostly Western devotees there, and very hard for them to relate to the situation. It was a struggle and a half. But now there's hundreds of thousands of devotees all over India preaching like anything. Amazing. In Punjabi Bag and Rohini and different places in Delhi. So many devotees are there. Not to speak of the main temple in Sant Nagar and so many other temples in Noida, Gurgaon, Dwarka, this place, that place, so many temples. You say, we say, oh, this and that. It's just envy. Just see what wonderful things are going on. So many books are being distributed. This is Prabhupada's glory. If we're envious of these things, it means we're envious of Prabhupada. It's absolutely wonderful. We may not be involved, we may not be able to relate to it, but it's wonderful. Okay, is that it? It said someone's typing, but there's nothing there. There's a blank. Anyway, Hare Krishna. What we'll do is, I don't know, maybe we can have a little kirtan. Oh, Pushpapan is there. Hare Krishna. Hare Fall, New York. Early in the morning for New York. Oh, it's really early. It's like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Hare Krishna. Fiji and Slovakia and Australia and England and Germany and Czech and New Zealand and Ireland and Scotland and Malaysia and Philippines and so many places. Yeah. Okay, well, it doesn't look like anything's there. So we'll finish off with a kirtan, and thank you all very, very much for being with us this morning. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, oh Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, hey, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Gaura Premanandi, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hari Nam Sankirtan ki jai. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees, oh, glorious to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari
Haribol,
Haribol.
Haribol,
Haribol. Thank you, Maharaj.
Haribol.
Thank you, Gurudev. Thank you, Gurudev.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Haribol,
Haribol, Gurudev, Gurudev ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.